Welcome back. Today on our journey through the Bible, we will continue to learn more about Jesus' miracles.
Me this I know, for the Bible tells me so. Little ones to him belong. They are weak, but he is strong. Yes, Jesus loves me. Yes, Jesus loves me. Yes, Jesus loves me. The Bible tells me so.
The Messiah. Our memory verse comes from Isaiah chapter 9, verse 6. For unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given, and the government shall be upon his shoulder, and his name shall be called Wonderful, Counselor, the Mighty God, the Everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace. The miracles. The theme verse for this aspect of the Messiah's life comes from Matthew 9, verse 35. And Jesus went about all the cities and villages, teaching in their synagogues, and preaching the gospel of the kingdom, and healing every sickness and every disease among the people. Woman with issue, Jairus' daughter. One day when Jesus was in Capernaum, a leader in the synagogue named Jairus came to him for help. His 12-year-old daughter was dying, and he wanted Jesus to heal her. Jesus went with Jairus, and his disciples followed, and as usual a large crowd of spectators followed along. While they were walking to Jairus' house, a woman who had been sick for 12 years with a bleeding disease saw Jesus in the crowd. She had been to every different type of doctor, and her disorder only became worse. She had heard of all the miracles Jesus had performed, and believed that if she could just touch the hem of his clothes, she would be healed. The woman quietly made her way through the crowd toward Jesus and touched his clothes, and immediately she was healed. The bleeding stopped, and she felt inside that she was cured. At the time she was healed, Jesus stopped dead in his tracks and asked, "Who touched me?" His disciples stated the obvious, that he was surrounded by a dense crowd of people. Everyone touched him. But Jesus recognized a touch of faith, because he said, "Virtue is gone out of me." Then the woman came forward and bowed at Jesus' feet and told him everything that had happened. Jesus said to her, "Daughter, be of good comfort. Thy faith hath made thee whole. Go in peace." As Jesus and the crowd continued on their way to Jairus' house, a messenger came from the house to tell Jairus that his daughter had died, and not to bother the master. Jesus said to Jairus not to be afraid, only believe, and his daughter would be made well again. When they arrived, Jesus brought Peter, James, and John into the house with him, and drove out the mourners that mocked his declaration that the girl was not dead, but sleeping. Jesus, his 3 disciples, and the girl's parents stayed in the house. Jesus took the girl by the hand and said, "Damsel, I say unto thee, arise." The girl got up, and Jesus told her parents to give her food. Then he instructed them not to tell anyone what had happened. Feeding 5,000 plus. Jesus empowered his disciples to cast out devils, heal the sick, and preach the kingdom of God in his name. Then he sent them out to minister to the people. He told them not to take with them any script, neither extra food nor clothes. They were to rely fully on the moving of the Holy Spirit. He also instructed them that if anyone would not receive them when they left that town, they should shake even the dust of that town off themselves. Sometime after sending his disciples out, Jesus received the news that John had been beheaded. When the disciples returned from their ministering journeys, they excitedly told Jesus of all they had done for the people. Then Jesus told his disciples that they should leave the city for a while to rest. So Jesus and his disciples left the city by boat and went to a deserted area of the city of Bethsaida. When they arrived there, news had already reached the people there that Jesus was coming. So a large crowd of about 5,000 men, not including women and children, were waiting there for them. Jesus had compassion on them. He preached to them of the kingdom of heaven and healed their sick. As the day went on, the disciples told Jesus to send the people away so that they could go into the nearby villages to buy food. Jesus told the disciples that they should give the people something to eat. The disciples had nothing and no money. Philip said even 200 penny worth of bread would not be enough to feed that many people. Then Jesus asked them what food there was. Andrew found a boy who had a lunch of 5 barley loaves and 2 small fishes. Jesus told them to bring it to him. He had the disciples organize the crowd, sitting them on the grass in groups of 50. Jesus then prayed and blessed the food. He broke the bread and the fish and gave to the disciples to give to the people in the crowd. At the end, everyone was well fed, and Jesus commanded the disciples to gather all the fragments of food that remained so that nothing went to waste. The disciples collected 12 baskets full of fragments. Peter's walk on water. After the feeding of the 5,000 plus, Jesus sent his disciples on by boat to Gennesaret, and he stayed behind to dismiss the crowd. After he sent the people home, Jesus stayed behind and went up into a mountain to pray. After he was done praying, he made his way to join the disciples. At this point, the disciples were in the middle of the sea, and a fierce storm was raging in the sea. Then the disciples saw a marvelous sight. Jesus was coming to them, walking on the water. When the disciples saw Jesus coming on the water, they began to fear because they thought he was a ghost. Jesus calmed their fears, declaring, "Be of good cheer, it is I. Be not afraid." Then Peter said, "Lord, if it be thou, bid me come unto thee on the water." So Jesus said, "Come." Then Peter stepped out of the boat and walked on the water toward Jesus. But when Peter saw the storm that was raging around him, he became afraid and began to sink. Then he cried out, "Lord, save me!" Jesus then came and reached out and caught Peter, saying, "O thou of little faith, wherefore didst thou doubt?" When Jesus and Peter got into the ship, the storm stopped, and all the disciples worshipped Jesus, acknowledging that he truly was the Son of God. When they got to Gennesaret, the news traveled swiftly, and all that were sick from throughout the land came to see and touch Jesus that they might be healed. Help thou my unbelief. As Jesus, Peter, James, and John descended the mountain where Jesus was transfigured and met with Moses and Elijah, they found the remaining apostles being accosted by a large crowd of people. When Jesus came near, he inquired about the problem. A man from the group came forward and told Jesus that he brought his sons to the disciples for help. His son was possessed by a deaf and dumb spirit that often threw him to the ground, foaming, or in fire or water to kill him. The man said he asked the disciples for help, but they could not cast out the demon. This news irritated Jesus. He said to the disciples, "O faithless generation, How long shall I be with you? How long shall I suffer you?" Then he told them to bring the young man to him. Jesus then asked the father how long his son had been plagued by this spirit. The man responded that this had been happening from the time his son was a child. Then he asked Jesus again to help him. Jesus told him that if he believed, everything is possible to him that believes. The man said to Jesus, "Lord, I believe. Help thou mine unbelief." With this request of faith, Jesus commanded the evil spirit to leave the young man and never to enter him again. The spirit cried out angrily and threw the young man to the ground again, then left him. The man's son was left on the ground and seemed to be dead. But Jesus reached out to him and lifted him from the ground. The young man got up, and Jesus returned him to his father. Later, when they were alone, the disciples asked Jesus why they were unable to cast out the demon. Jesus told them that if they had faith like a mustard seed, very small, they could move a mountain. But to deal with demons like that one requires fasting and prayer. 10 lepers. According to Levitical law, a person who was diagnosed with leprosy by a priest was to leave the main community and live away from everyone else. This was necessary because leprosy is a very contagious disease. The clothes, bedding, even articles of furniture used by the leper were to be discarded because they contained the disease. If the person was healed of the leprosy, they were required to show themselves to the priest with an offering that they may officially be declared as clean and return to society. One day, Jesus and his disciples journeyed to Jerusalem. On their way, they passed through Samaria and Galilee. As they passed through a nearby village, 10 men who were lepers called out to Jesus, asking him to have mercy on them and heal them. When Jesus saw them, he told them to go and show themselves to the priest. As they journeyed to the priest, they were healed. One of the 10 men, who was a Samaritan, when he realized he was healed, turned back and thanked Jesus for his mercy. Jesus extolled the Samaritan's gratitude to God and sent him on his way, telling him that his faith in God healed him. Now it's time for our activity. First question: how long was the woman with the issue sick, and how old was Jairus' daughter? Correct. The woman was sick for 12 years, and Jairus' daughter was 12 years old. Next question: what short prayer did Peter exclaim when he was sinking? That's correct. Lord, save me. The length of the prayer doesn't matter. It's the faith that's with it. Last question: what did the father seeking healing for his son ask Jesus to do for him? That's right. He asked Jesus to help his unbelief. Now take out a sheet of paper and draw a picture of the 5,000 men and families organized. And then write or say the memory verse and theme verses from memory.
Yes, Jesus
Next
loves
time,
me.
we'll read even more
Yes,
about Jesus'
Jesus
miracles.
loves me. Yes, Jesus loves me, for the Bible tells me so.